What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Thank you for tuning in once again. And this time I'm going to be checking out a very, very cool video that was only released, when was it? It was only released like a couple of weeks ago, I think. Yeah, 12th of September. Wow, okay, just last week. So this one, I think it's quite important to watch and to react to with you guys because although it's already had over 2 million views, so I'm sure probably most of you have seen this one by now. But it is how every team got its name and identity. So, aside from learning all the, the ins and outs of the game and the dynamics of the sport and the plays and offense, defense and all that sort of stuff, I also think it's very important to understand like the culture and the fan base and also the origin stories of each team. And I'm really glad that they made something like this because I had been looking for something similar but I couldn't find anything. So yeah, it is a long one though, guys. It's half an hour long, 30 minutes. So grab yourself a drink and a snack and join me and let's check it out, see what we got. Should be fun.
The NFL is currently made up of 32 different franchises. But did you know over 75 have existed in league history?
Whoa.
We're turning back the gridiron clock. It's the official evolution of the NFL, 100 years in the making.
Awesome.
The NFL was born in 1920, known originally as the American Professional Football Association.
Okay.
It started with 14 teams, 12 of them clumped together in the Midwest. Whoa. 2 others playing in New York.
They're all just in that tiny little area.
This group, you had to put up $100 for a franchise.
You'll notice many of the early franchises didn't even have official team logos. Because teams were so informal back then, they just didn't even create them.
Jim Thorpe was unanimously elected president because of the name recognition that he could garner for
just the yellow triangle.
National Pro Football League.
Of the 14 original teams, only 2 would stick around to celebrate the league's 100th anniversary.
Is that the Chicago Bears?
Staley's, known today as the Chicago Bears, and the oldest team in the NFL, the Chicago Cardinals.
I thought that was the Chicago Bears.
Built their nest in Arizona.
The story behind the Cardinals' name really goes back to Chris O'Brien when he purchased the uniforms that the Cardinals were going to wear.
I remember one of you guys telling me about this.
The Chicago Maroons, and they were faded, and somebody referred to the jerseys as maroon color, and he said, those aren't maroon, that's cardinal red, and that cardinal name stuck.
Yeah.
While those 2 franchises are the oldest in the game, they did not win the league's first ever title. That distinction belongs to the Akron Pros, who finished that inaugural season undefeated at 8-0-3. Yes, 3 ties. The Pros weren't just the league's first champions either. They were also the first team in the league to break the color barrier.
The Akron Pros are one of those teams that are lost to history, but Fritz Pollard was both a player and a coach for that Akron Pros team.
And since diamond-filled Super Bowl rings were clearly not the rage just yet, all the Pros players received this tiny gold football pendant for their efforts. The Pros were also the first
that must be worth so much.
of the league's championship trophy, known as the Brunswick Balky Colander Cup, which to this day represents one of the greatest mysteries in NFL lore. It was lost after that first season, and this is the only known picture of it.
Wooden antlers.
Following the league's first year, 2 teams renamed themselves and 1 moved. The Decatur Staleys, setting up shop in Chicago and winning their first ever championship while they were at it. The Chicago Tigers, meanwhile, folded, but 8 new teams joined. The league was now up to 21 teams,
Green Bay Packers,
located in Midwestern and Eastern states.
New York Giants.
Several of the new additions didn't last long. The Tonawanda Cardax holding the ultimate one-hit wonder crown, playing just 1 league game. Thereby making it the shortest-lived franchise in NFL history. The Dexys Midnight Runners of teams. The Green Bay Packers, however, would stick around, cementing itself as one of the storied franchises in the league.
For sure.
In Green Bay, Wisconsin, a team was founded with
it had something to do with the East India Shipping Company, didn't it?
They became known as the Packers.
Oh, the Indian,
Packers were one of those first teams that stadium was constructed with football as its main sport.
Is that the original Lambeau?
No other team in the league has played in the same city under the same name for as long as Green Bay has. Following the 21 season,
Awesome.
7 teams left the league and 4 new ones joined. The Milwaukee Badgers, the Oorang Indians, the Racine Legion, and the Toledo Maroons.
They
The
didn't last.
Staleys, meantime, made a good call and changed their name to the Bears.
Nice.
Their owner, George Halas, picked Bears because they originally were playing their games in the same stadium as the Chicago Cubs. Halas not only wanted to connect his new team to the more established baseball franchise, but he also reasoned that football players in general were bigger than baseball players,
The
so
Cubs,
the name made
of
sense
course.
on multiple levels. But the even bigger name change that took place that year
I just
was
clicked.
the leagues. The American Professional Football Association was out to be known forever on as the National Football League.
Sweet.
I think a lot of that comes from wanting to be looked at or viewed as a national organization.
As the 1923 season got underway, it did so without the Evansville Crimson Giants, who bowed out, the Cleveland Indians, Duluth Kellys, and
Baseball,
St.
isn't
Louis All-Stars all checked in. In 1924, 5 teams left. 3 joined, the cities of Frankfort, Kenosha, and Kansas City all being granted membership in the league.
Does that
A
turn
year
into the
later,
Chiefs?
though, Kenosha, Racine, and Minneapolis all left. The Blues changed their name to the Cowboys. Canton rejoined, and Detroit, Providence, Pottsville, and New York were all added to the mix. The Giants, the lone team to stick, making them the 4th oldest team in the league.
Awesome.
Tim Mara set up his storefront in the Polo Grounds, located on Upper Manhattan's Coogan's Bluff.
Founded in
New York Giants
1925.
name came about really to attach the football team with their Major League Baseball counterpart, trying to gain some of that fandom from Major League Baseball.
That means ultimately the name Giants was inspired by all the skyscrapers in New York. In 1926, 3 teams changed their names, including the league's first ever champs, the Akron Pros, who switched to the Indians. 3 franchises were dropped, but the Racine Legion came back as the Tornadoes, and 4 others were also added. The Brooklyn Lions, the Hartford Blues, the Louisville Colonels, and the Los Angeles Buccaneers.
Hey.
Marking the first time the league had a team out west, although they never actually played any games in LA.
Ultimately, the LA Buccaneers played as a traveling team and really took up shop in Chicago. Played out of that city and then traveled as a barnstorming team, really.
The NFL really shook things up the following season when it got rid of more than half of its member clubs. The Cleveland Bulldogs were back, and the New York Yankees were added. 12 teams now making up the young league. And yes, I said the New York Yankees. The NFL was down to 10 teams the next year. Duluth and Buffalo losing their spots in the league, while the Cleveland Bulldogs moved to Detroit and became the Wolverines. But they didn't last long. One of 3 teams to fold up shop the next season. Buffalo came back, and the Orange Tornadoes, Staten Island Stapletons, and Minneapolis Red Jackets all joined. Come on in. Now, as the NFL began its 2nd decade in existence, the turnover of teams was starting to slow down a little bit. 3 franchises were dropped, 2 joined. The Portsmouth Spartans, who are known today as the Detroit Lions and are the 5th oldest team in the NFL.
Wow.
In 1931, the Cleveland Indians were back. However, the Red Jackets and Tornadoes dropped out. 1932 was another significant blip on the NFL timeline. The Indians, Steamrollers, and Yellow Jackets departed, and the Boston Braves were added, which you know today is the Washington Redskins. But by adding only 1 team and losing 3, the league was down to 8 teams. It was the smallest the league ever got.
We had the league really trying to protect itself and stay
nice
with
run.
fewer teams but have them more successful.
Then in 1933, the Cincinnati Reds were introduced to pro football, along with 2 Pennsylvania franchises that would establish permanent roots in the league.
Eagles and
the
Steelers.
Pittsburgh Pirates, who eventually changed their name to the Steelers, and the Philadelphia Eagles.
Nice.
It's funny when you read the stories leading up to the first game that the team played. Glenn Ray was very optimistic. We're a first-year team, but we're going to surprise people.
They shared a lot of names with the baseball teams as well, didn't they?
Giants and lost 56-0.
Philadelphia owners Burt Bell and Lud Ray settled on the name Eagles in honor of the symbol used by the National Recovery Act that was part of Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal that followed in the wake of the Great Depression. The 33 season was also when the owner of the Boston Braves decided it was time for a new name.
George Preston Marshall wanted to stick with the Native American theme, so he didn't want to keep the Braves name because that was the name of the baseball franchise.
Yeah,
so
that's what I was saying.
He chose the Redskins.
That season was also the first in which divisions were created, which set up the first official NFL championship game.
Bears ball on their own 12-yard line.
Prior to that, the league champion was simply the team that had the best record at the end of the season. The Bears would represent the West, the Giants the East, with Chicago beating New York 23-21 for the title.
Close game.
Really was the beginning of the popularity of pro football.
The following year saw the same exact 10 teams return, marking the first time in the league's history there were no changes. But mid-season, the Cincinnati Reds folded and were replaced by the St. Louis Gunners for the last 3 games. It would be the only 3 games they would play as an NFL franchise.
Cool name.
Also in 1934, the Portsmouth Spartans moved to Detroit and changed their name to the Lions. The name was inspired by baseball's Detroit Tigers, though the team had a different explanation. Quote, "The lion is considered the monarch of the jungle, and we hope to be the monarch of the league." From 1935 to 1936, the same 9 teams remained, but it was in 36 that the NFL held its first ever draft.
Before 1936, every player coming out of college was a free agent. And a lot of times, those players were going to the teams with the biggest checkbook.
The Eagles used the first ever pick on Chicago Maroons halfback and first ever winner of the Heisman Trophy, Jay Berwanger. But Berwanger would never play it down in the NFL. The Bears, who acquired his rights from the Eagles, were not able to meet Berwanger's salary demands, which ultimately led him to take a job in sales for a rubber company. It's
no
true.
way.
1937, the Boston Redskins made the move to Washington, and the NFL grew back to 10 teams, awarding a franchise to the Cleveland Rams. These are the same Rams that call Los Angeles home today.
Whoa.
The name Rams came about because their GM at the time, Damon Buzz Wetzel's favorite college football team, had always been the Fordham Rams, so they simply copied it. As the 30s came to a close, the league was starting to stabilize. There were no changes to the NFL landscape in either 1938 or 39. But 1939 was monumental for the future of the league, even if its participants didn't realize it at the time.
The Brooklyn Dodgers hosted the Philadelphia Eagles before a crowd of 13,000 fans. Few, if any, in attendance even noticed the cameras of NBC station W2XBS. Their presence marked the first ever telecast of a professional football game.
The first ever TV broadcast was only seen in parts of New York, but the seed was planted. The game's financial future, stability, and popularity were all secured with the marriage between the NFL and television. The 1940 season was significant for 2 reasons. First, Pittsburgh traded in the Pirates nickname.
They changed their name to the Steelers because of a steel worker ultimately proposed the name Steelers, and that stuck, knowing that the steel industry was so big in that area.
That year also saw the first iteration of the now famous NFL Shield, the league unveiling the iconic logo for the very
hasn't changed much.
And the Chicago Bears introduced its first official team logo, a black bear running with a football. Now here's the thing. Most NFL teams have updated their logos several times over. So if you pay close attention to the map, you'll see how those updates happen. The league's member clubs continued to remain steady until 1943. That's the season the Cleveland Rams suspended operations for a year, but did not fold. It was due in part because of so many of their players were drafted into military service for World War II, which is also what led the Eagles and Steelers to merge, taking on the unofficial nickname, the Steagles.
What?
Yeah. The Steelers struggled for years and years. It took them a decade and merging with the Philadelphia Eagles before they had their first ever winning season.
In 1944, the Eagles were back on their own, but Pittsburgh was still on shaky ground, so they looked for a new team to merge with, and they found a willing partner in the Chicago Cardinals, the combined teams known as Card Pit. The league also added the Boston Yanks. The Cleveland Rams returned, and the Brooklyn Dodgers changed their name to the Brooklyn Tigers. In 45, the Cardinals and Steelers merger was over. Both teams went back on their own. But the Brooklyn Tigers and Boston Yanks joined forces to form a new team known simply as the Yanks. Like the previous two mergers, it didn't last long. In 1946, the Tigers folded, so the Boston Yanks were back on their own. That same season saw the Rams pack up and head west for the sunny skies of Los Angeles,
nice.
marking the first time actual games were played in LA proper.
Awesome.
The Cleveland Rams won a championship in 1945, and then their owner, Dan Reeves, moved them out to LA. This is maybe the only time that I can think of where a professional team won a championship and then moved locations.
1947 and 48 came and went with many additions, subtractions, or relocations. But in 49, the Boston Yanks moved to New York and became the New York Bulldogs. Then came the next big expansion when the NFL merged with the All-America Football Conference in 1950, adding 3 new teams. The San Francisco 49ers, the Baltimore Colts, but not the same Baltimore Colts franchise that would emerge a few years later, and the Cleveland Browns.
The Browns open their season against the Philadelphia
Cleveland Browns.
Philadelphia, and with some 71
Who came up with that name?
Attendance, most of them National League fans of former years.
Got to be something better than Browns.
Football world with a rude 35
in my opinion, easily the worst name in the league.
Formed in 1945, and they're the only team named after a person. The inspiration coming from Cleveland's first head coach and GM, Paul Brown.
Okay.
Some people claim that it's more about Joe Louis being named the Brown Bomber, but I really do think in this area, Paul Brown is football, and his name really is the backing behind the Cleveland Browns being named the Browns.
What an honor.
The 49ers name, on the other hand, is more straightforward.
56,000.
I thought it was just the color.
Between the Rams of Los Angeles and the San Francisco 49ers.
They were named after the settlers who ventured into the San Francisco area during the gold rush of 1849.
Joe the Jet Perry.
Okay, I don't think I knew that.
On a sensational 58-yard
That's cool.
gallop up the far sidelines.
The first incarnation of the Colts didn't last long, folding after the 1950 season. They were followed out the door the next season by the New York Yanks, who were replaced by the Dallas Texans. The Texans' stay in the NFL was brief. The team lasted just 1 season of play.
The Dallas Texans, they're the last franchise to fold in the National Football League.
The league found its replacements for the Texans the following year when the second iteration of the Baltimore Colts emerged. And these Colts would have staying power, as they are the same Colts who have since moved to Indianapolis.
Oh, okay.
Baltimore fans were given the opportunity to vote on a team name, and they stuck with Colts. Not only as an homage to the team that had just folded a few seasons earlier, but as a way to honor the region's history of horse breeding. From 1953 to 1959,
I like it.
All was quiet.
Oh, nothing.
Teams added, none dropped. 1960, however, was a pivotal year. The Chicago Cardinals moved to St. Louis, and we saw the birth of America's team.
Eddie LeBaron uncorks the
Cowboys.
Money play. Frank Clark gathers in the long rollout pass, and in the race to the goal line, Frank's an easy winner.
The Cowboys originally were going to be nicknamed the Steers, but their GM, Texas E. Schramm,
Cowboys is way
having
better.
a castrated bovine as a mascot might lead to some unwanted ridicule. So they shifted gears and were leaning towards Rangers instead.
Oh yeah, no, Rangers is
there
cool.
was already a local minor league baseball team with that name, Schramm settled on Cowboys, and the rest is history.
That's
Even
cool.
bigger than the Cowboys joining the fold was the emergence of the American Football League.
Solid name.
As you look back at the year of 1960, you probably remember a great many sports events. However, I doubt that anything was more important than the establishment of the American Football League.
The AFL was originally made up of 8 teams. The Houston Oilers, who eventually became the Tennessee Titans, the New York Titans, who are now the Jets, the Buffalo Bills, the Boston Patriots, now the New England Patriots, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Dallas Texans, who would later become the Kansas City Chiefs,
the
Oakland Raiders, and the Denver Broncos.
They all wanted
heaps of teams.
NFL franchises, but most of these owners had, enough money in their own right to start a franchise. But the league was very strategic about how they were going to expand, and so they weren't quite ready to expand yet.
The Broncos got their name from a fan who offered it up in a Name the Team contest.
Dude.
He noted the animal's toughness and said the Denver area was well known for its wild Broncos.
Imagine being the person who named an NFL team.
A very popular way teams came up with their nicknames. They were so popular, in fact, it's how the LA Chargers came up with theirs.
Kemp this time, passing
fan contests, eh?
And it's good for a touchdown.
Team owner Baron Hilton reportedly liked the name so much, he didn't open another letter after coming across what turned out to be the winning submission. Barron told reporters he always liked the charge bugle cry that fans would bellow out at games.
That's cool, man. So it's initially like a war reference.
Team in the All-America Football Conference,
not an electricity reference.
By the Bills. The Bills' nickname was a reference to Buffalo Bill Cody. When owner Ralph Wilson bought the team, he held a contest and picked Bills out of respect to the city's defunct AAFC team.
Oh, okay.
Skill and precision teamwork.
That's cool.
Spectacular thrills to the fans. Professional football at its exciting best.
74 fans voted for Patriots in their naming contest, connecting them to the men who originally fought to establish the United States as a country. Pat Patriot, the cartoon of a Minuteman preparing to snap a football, was drawn by a Boston Globe employee and was chosen as the logo soon after.
And it's away. The Jimmy Coke
pretty cool.
An Oakland woman originally submitted the winning entry to name Oakland's franchise, coming up with Señors. The name alluded to the old Spanish settlers of Northern California. But when it got out, there was so much criticism, even claims the contest was fixed. They decided to pick another one of the entries, going with Raiders, which they selected over Lakers. The following year, the Chargers jumped on the freeway and moved to San Diego, while the NFL added the Minnesota Vikings to its lineup, giving it an even 14 teams.
Hi, this is a Minnesota Viking football helmet. It was in the middle of a lot of hard-nosed football last year.
Minnesota got its name from their GM, Bert Rose, who recommended the name because Vikings were aggressive people with a will to win, and it would honor the Nordic tradition in the northern Midwest.
That's cool.
Take Tarkenton long to prove that he's one rookie who's here to stay. France pass to Bob Stelker gives the Vikings their first touchdown in official league play.
You know, the Vikings are the first team to actually use a region as their franchise name as opposed to the city that they play in.
No changes in 1962, but in 1963, the New York Titans changed their name to the Jets.
Let's go, Jets!
Whoa, they hadn't changed their uniforms in ages until this season, eh?
They originally were going to name the team Dodgers, but got pushback from Major League Baseball. Gotham's also got some consideration,
Batman.
But they balked when they realized it would get shortened to Goths. They almost got the name Boroughs, certainly an homage to the city's famous neighborhoods, but team officials worried opposing fans would translate it their own way and start calling them the Jackasses. Eventually they went with Jets, since they planned to play their home games in Shea Stadium, which was close to LaGuardia Airport. In 1963, the Dallas Texans relocated to Kansas City and changed their name to the Chiefs.
Sweet.
Professional
got the
football,
Chiefs.
That most fascinating, most exciting of all spectator sports, came to Mid-America in 1963 when the Dallas Texans became the Kansas City Chiefs.
Owner Lamar Hunt didn't pick Chiefs right away.
So that's why the Texans and the Cowboys existed at the same time.
Royals and Stars. He went with Chiefs because he said a large number of Native Americans lived in the area. Hunt may also have chosen it due to Kansas City's mayor, Roy Bartle. Bartle helped lure the team to Kansas City, and his nickname was, you guessed it, the Chief. Nothing changed in 64, nothing changed in 65. But in 1966, everything changed. First, the Atlanta Falcons came on the scene.
Got the Falcons.
Randy Johnson connected with Gary Barnes for the Falcons' first touchdown in championship play.
Nice.
500 different names were offered up by fans, including the Atlanta Peaches, the Vibrants, Lancers, Confederates, Firebirds, and Thrashers. The winning entry was submitted by several people.
Falcons,
but the winner of the contest was a school teacher whose entry described the Falcon as proud and dignified.
The Vibrants.
Great courage to fight. She noted it never drops its prey, is deadly, and has great sporting tradition.
I think it's wonderful. The Falcons won.
I was real satisfied.
Gosh, I think it was great.
The AFL also expanded that season, adding the Miami Dolphins as its 9th team.
The Dolphins' debut must go down in football history as the most thrilling first play ever made by any new team anywhere.
First play
from nearby Coral Gables High School in the Georgia
in the franchise's history.
The opening kickoff and races 95 yards for a touchdown.
All the way.
600 fans suggested Dolphins.
The ownership group liked that the Dolphin was the smartest, fastest creature of the sea.
Being an expansion team, he needed a lot of things to perhaps draw people into it, and he would throw the footballs back out. So Flipper was cool.
But the biggest shift to take place
reminds me of Ace Ventura.
Season end.
Yeah, I get that starting line up here to get a program. Football line up here.
When the NFL and AFL champions met to face one another in the first ever Super Bowl.
All right. So that turned into AFC, NFC.
The Green Bay Packers beat the Kansas City Chiefs handily, 35-10, and professional football was on its way to taking over as the country's new national pastime.
Oh, wow. Sick catch.
In 1967, the NFL added yet another new team, this time in New Orleans, and fittingly, they were awarded their franchise on November 1st, which is All Saints Day. However, the name came from yet another Name the Team contest. Owner John Beacom acknowledged he chose it as a nod to the popular song When the Saints Go Marching In, which was a favorite among many of the city's street jazz bands. It was the AFL's turn to grow in 1968, which is when they added the Cincinnati Bengals.
Down by 8 points with 1 minute and 54 seconds left in the game, Dewey Warren hit Bob Trumpy for a touchdown.
Team owner and general manager Paul Brown chose Bengals to honor a football team that played in Cincy from 1937 to 1941. He chose the nickname over the fans' most popular suggestion, the Buckeyes. 2 years later, in 1970, the NFL and the AFL finally merged. All 10 teams from the American Football League being absorbed by the NFL.
Most NFL players and coaches and administrators didn't look at the AFL as being in the same league as the National Football League and its club members. And so Super Bowl III, when the New York Jets shocked the world and defeated the Baltimore Colts, and then the Kansas City Chiefs winning Super Bowl IV, probably was the best thing for the league moving into its merger, because it really put both leagues on equal playing field.
The following year, the Patriots dropped Boston as its location identifier.
Starting to recognize these logos now.
Then from 1972 to 75, it was another quiet stretch for the league. But in 1976, the Seattle Seahawks and Tampa Bay Buccaneers joined the fold. A panel of sports writers, along with Tampa Bay owner Hugh Culverson, chose Buccaneers from an original list of more than 400 as a nod to the pirates who raided Florida's coastline in the 17th century. Seattle, meantime, received more than 1,700 unique suggestions, including the Seattle Skippers, the Pioneers, the Lumberjacks, and the Seattle Seagulls.
Seahawks.
GM John Thompson
Way
said they went
better.
with Seahawks because it suggests aggressiveness, reflects our soaring Northwest heritage, and wasn't being used by any other major league teams. The NFL landscape then went unchanged until 1982, and that's when the Raiders moved south to Los Angeles. In 1984, the Baltimore Colts packed up and moved to Indianapolis. 4 years later, in '88, the Cardinals were on the move again, heading west to Arizona, initially going by the Phoenix Cardinals. In 1994, though, they went statewide, changing their name to the Arizona Cardinals. Then in 1995, the Rams took the Cardinals' place in St. Louis, and the Raiders went back to Oakland, leaving LA with no NFL teams. It was also time for expansion once again. The Carolina Panthers and Jacksonville Jaguars becoming franchises.
Young teams, man.
The Jaguars play their first NFL game against the Houston Oilers.
The Jaguars were the result of another fan contest.
Wow.
Surprisingly, the initial concept for their logo on their helmet was very similar to the car Jaguar logo.
Oh, yeah.
Shortly after a cease and desist letter was sent by the Jaguar car company, and they decided to go with a different style logo.
The home opener for the expansion Carolina Panthers.
Sick logos.
Chose Panthers because they believed it symbolized what an NFL team should be: powerful, sleek, and strong.
For the Panthers, the wait is finally over as they make their home debut today. And there's one thing on their minds: Carolina.
In 1996, the Cleveland Browns were moved to Baltimore. However, the Ravens would be considered a new franchise, with the Browns essentially suspending operations, keeping their colors, records, and history.
Whoa.
Crowd expected in Baltimore.
Ravens haven't been there for that long.
Returns to this city for the first time since 1983.
Baltimore owner Art Modell attempted and failed to buy the Colts nickname back from the franchise that left Baltimore for Indy in 1984. So once again, a name the team contest was held.
Oh, man.
Ravens beat out the Marauders and the Americans, and was a nod to Baltimore native Edgar Allan Poe's famous poem titled The Raven. 1997 saw the Houston Oilers pack up and move to Tennessee, though they initially kept the name Oilers. They changed it to Titans in 1999. Their naming contest produced options like the Tennessee Tornadoes, the Copperheads, the South Stars, and the Wranglers, among others. Owner Bud Adams chose
They're all
Titans
pretty good names.
because it reflected strength, leadership, and other heroic qualities.
Titans is cool though.
That same year saw the return of the Browns, who picked up right where they left off after missing the previous 2 seasons. Then in 2002, the Houston Texans were added, filling out the current 32-team league as we know it today.
Reliance Stadium, 69.
Hasn't changed since then.
Who were crushed when the Oilers left are here tonight for their new team, the Texans.
The Texans became the 6th professional football team to use the name. Owner Bob McNair choosing it over Apollos and Stallions. The Texans logo, by the way, is the only one of the 32 teams that has never been tinkered with. For the next 10 plus years,
it is the youngest,
there's nothing but teams altering their logos. Most of the changes pretty minor in nature. It wasn't until 2016 that the next landscaping alterations took place. The St. Louis Rams moving back to LA, who were followed by the Chargers a season later. And finally, in 2020, the Raiders vacate Oakland for a second time, this time heading east for the desert, setting up shop in Las Vegas.
I've been following the stadium.
Expansion, contraction,
project.
Mergers, name changes. The NFL has seen it all in its first 100 years, and we can only imagine how far this map will stretch in the century to come.
Ooh. Will they go outside the borders? Do you reckon there'll ever be like a Canadian NFL team? I don't know. They've got their own league, I suppose. But yeah, that's crazy. And also, I noticed that the Seahawks are like way up there, like on their own. There's like no one, you know, in like that sort of Montana, Idaho area. But I suppose that just comes down to like population and fan base. But yeah, anyway, that was cool. I learned a lot then. I took in heaps. It was really cool. Really cool. It was good. I'm glad that they were talking and explaining it as well. That it wasn't just like a graphic that was kind of just changing before your eyes and everything. But yeah, that was really enjoyable. And yeah, so I feel like I know a lot more about each franchise now and you know, their origins and their roots and how they started and where they came from. So that was really cool. Anyway guys, we're almost at, over half an hour now, so I'm going to end it, and smash the like button if you enjoyed it, comment down below, and subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you on the next one. See you later.